Ja som veľmi rád, že sme sa tu zišli, lebo my sme si po novom roku, keď sme sa stretli s Miriam aj s Filipom a s Monikou, povedali, že tento rok je taký, že volebný a všetkých nás to trochu nejak zamestnáva, lebo sú to predčasne narodené voľby, na ktoré sme až tak pripravení neboli. Američania majú voľby tiež tento rok, no a tak sme si povedali, že čo keby sme si vypočuli Davida, ktorého za chvíľu predstavím, že čo robia kresťania v Spojených štátoch pred voľbami a potom voľne prípadne, či sa z toho dá inšpirovať, alebo niečo je zaujímavé okolo toho. Lebo David Reichardt prednáša na Univerzite Komenského už asi 12 rokov na právnickej fakulte na Ústave medzinárodných vzťahov.
Pioneer, yeah, that's good for Americans, huh? Pioneer. I want to thank you for coming. First of all, I know you're very busy, you have many things to do, so thank you very much for accepting the invitation today. Pavol told me this should be a motivational talk. So I'm a teacher, and I think by nature, teachers, we are motivated. We have to motivate. So maybe I can do a little bit today with the motivation, and I try to make it a little bit with humor. So also, I think this will help our discussion a little bit. I want to begin by telling a story. When I teach at the law faculty, the Právnická fakulta, but I also teach in another faculty of the university where I have the first year students, yeah, the very first year. And I have about 100 of them in an auditorium. First year students, yeah? They say prvoročník, huh? And I noticed over the years that in the first row are usually, mostly they are girls. And they are very serious, they are writing, and they are then the second row are, more boys, and the last row is almost all boys, and some of these boys should be in prison, probably. They are maybe criminals, I don't know, but they are not interested in my lecture. So I tried also to make a little humor. So I told the students, no mobiles. Yeah, mobile off. Yeah, cancel that. Cancel your mobile. Well, what happened? I was giving my lecture to the students, and it was my it was my mobile was ringing, and I just told the students no mobile. Well, what did I do? I had to think very quickly. So I picked up my mobile and I said, President Obama. Mr. President, don't bother me while I'm giving my talk, Mr. President. Please call me later. And students. So, sometimes when you're a teacher, especially of the first year students, you have to think very quickly. Yeah. Today, the talk will be, as you can see, about the American experience with Christian groups and the elections. So I'd like to begin here with a little bit of background. Oh, that's some high-tech that I learned. And part one, I will talk a little bit background about historical, cultural, and legal background of Christianity in America, because I think it's really important to understand this background, to understand today the activity of Christian groups in the United States. I put here Christian immigration to America. Early groups, Christian groups and denominations that came to the United States, and as you can see, some of the later ones. And I put this also in Slovenčina here, I think, here. So you can see some of the earlier groups that initially were coming to the shores of the what becomes the United States, and of course some of the later groups. Just a few of them, just a very few, to give you some idea. If we talk then about the 17th and 18th centuries, we think first, well, about the history of the Mayflower and the Pilgrims, or we call them in English the Pilgrim Fathers. They were actually Puritans. They were a sect of Puritans. And who were Puritans? Well, they wanted to purify the Church of England, the Anglican Church, and make it more fundamental in a way. Some of the colonies actually started very religiously, as you can see here. Yeah, interesting. Maryland really began as a colony for Roman Catholics. A lot of people don't know that. Massachusetts, of course, the Puritans, and Virginia, Church of England, or the Anglican denomination. So quite interesting. At the very beginning, we're talking more 17th century here. Yeah. 19th century, Christians begin to be very active in a big movement. And of course, if you know the history of the United States, what was the movement? Big focus, emphasis, abolition. Abolition movement, okay? Anti-slavery movement. And that begins to mobilize many Christians for this project. And of course, with the Civil War, it finally is successful. Later in the 19th century, Christians mobilized, and especially Christian women, in the so-called temperance movement. Temperance movement was a organized movement of Christians to fight alcoholism, which was a big problem in the well, still is a big problem everywhere, but in the 19th century. Why? Because the men were drinking, they were not working, they were not supporting the families, they were sometimes beating their wives, and so it was a very big problem. And the Christians were active in this. 20th century, these were some of the Christian activities or projects in the 20th century. As you can see, there are child labor and labor laws in general, poverty, social welfare topics, and disarmament and pacifism, which becomes very important during and after the First World War. Interesting that many Christian women were leading these movements, especially the disarmament and pacifist movement.